In life, we have a lot of choices. Left or right, up or down, yes or no. And because of how we function as human beings, we make these choices automatically, without even giving them a second thought. But this raises the question, can we do everything? Is it possible to do both? To see both? Now, before I explain what I mean by that, I want you to take a look at this image. It's entitled "My Wife and My Mother-in-Law." Initially, what did you see? Perhaps you saw the vision of a young lady facing away, a thin jawline, eyelids fanning out from her face. Or perhaps you saw an older lady with a larger, prominent nose and dark, thin lips. Maybe you saw one, or maybe you saw the other. Or perhaps you saw both. And every second that you looked at the image, you focused your attention on both interpretations. Silhouettes see both.
The idea of being able to hold two seemingly opposite images in one head was formalized by the German philosopher Georg Hegel. What he observed and codified was the fact that all of us as human beings, part of our humanity is when we see or experience something, we form an immediate impression of it. He called it a thesis. So when you see something, you quickly form a thesis. If you're able to reflect a little while, you might actually see the opposite as well, called the antithesis. And if you dive down deeper even more, you might actually create a synthesis. And that's the core of what we would like to tell you about today, have a discussion on this, the ability to hold two different images in your mind at the same time. So if you look at the image that Rena showed you, some of you in the audience may have seen the young woman. Some of you in the audience may have seen the old woman. The fact that we're discussing this now allows everybody in the audience to say, it's actually both. Silhouettes see both.
The ability to see both that Dr. Menon and I have just mentioned is a skill that's critical to examining the 21st century and beyond. Because when we look at a silhouette, there isn't just one objective truth. In fact, there's multiple, oftentimes opposite realities coexisting in the very same nature. The ability to see both is exemplified in the interconnectedness between sciences and the humanities. Today we have examples of science as art, science as music, and science as literature to help you see the both rather than the either or. Silhouettes see both.
As Rena mentioned to you, the idea of being able to see both is not a new one. During the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci created a very important synthesis of art and science. What you see here in this picture is the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man was Leonardo da Vinci's insight that human shape and form and art, when it is placed in certain geometrical shapes, you can see the circle and the square, suddenly reveals proportion and perception. And after the Renaissance, it suddenly became possible for a person to be both an artist and a scientist. And if you look at a modern 21st century version of the Vitruvian Man, it would be digitized in a way that you could do so with a great degree of precision. The idea that came through the Renaissance was lost. We somehow unlearned the idea that a person could be both a scientist and an artist simultaneously, the idea of synthesis. Perhaps during the industrial age, when the great machines of society were being created, the railroads and factories and so forth, and all those mechanistic projections were put upon society. So people began to think of themselves as parts of the machine of society. I'm a cog, I'm a wheel, I'm a lever. People rarely thought of themselves as being metacognitive, able to hold all these multiple things. I'm a cog and a wheel and a lever whenever I need to be. So we need to relearn the ideas of the Renaissance, and we need to unlearn the ideas of the industrial age as we go forward in the 21st century. Silhouettes see both.
Now I want you to take a look at this next image. It's Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. Many of you have heard of it, seen it, and it's pretty well known in popular culture. But what you might not know is the implications of science and cognition and math and the natural world that are hidden in the very fabric of this work. Vincent van Gogh completed this piece during his stay at an asylum. Now, he was granted a lot more freedoms than some of other patients because he had his own studio, he was able to create his own art, but he still suffered from hallucinations and other struggles with his own mental illness. Vincent van Gogh's painting is at the crossroads of his conflicting feelings, emotions, and thoughts. Scientists, mathematicians, physicists, and other researchers have looked for the implications of math, physics, cognition, psychology, to see what they can understand from this painting. This painting shows objects and scenes in motions that reflect what Van Gogh was feeling. So researchers took to the painting and they digitized it. They looked at the pixels, they looked at areas of light and darkness and brightness. And what they found was astonishing. Because when they digitized this painting, they noticed a phenomenon called fluid turbulence. But more simply put, it's fluid motion, a phenomenon we see in physics and in the natural world. So because of what Vincent van Gogh was feeling, his creativity, his struggles with his mind and his thoughts, his piece is at the crossroads of science and visual arts. Now next, I want to talk to you a little about science and music. I want you guys to imagine that you're listening to the sounds, the music from a horror film. What do you feel? Do you feel anxious, scared? Do the hairs on your arms stick up straight? Hold on to those feelings and think about them. Compare them to what you feel when you listen to a lullaby. You feel calm, you feel soothed, you feel relaxed. Musicians have these powerful tools when they hand select every note, every chord, every interval, every arrangement of their piece, because they know how it affects our minds, our bodies, our souls. We like to think that musicians are just artists, when in reality they're scientists too, because they know that the end point of their music is our brain. Our brain sends out chemicals like dopamine that release those feelings of joy and happiness when we listen to the music that we like. So as much as we see musicians in that only one-way facet of artists, there's the implications of science as well. In this next image, notice how our brains are illuminated and activated when we listen to music. The music, the notes, every choice that musicians make physically changes us, the chemicals and the reactions that we have in our bodies. Because the silhouettes of science and music see both.
Rena has very eloquently told you about visual arts and music, and the third leg of the triangle is language, literature, and words. The great philosopher Abraham Heschel said, "Words make worlds." When we hear words, when words come into our ears, they create images in our mind of what the other person is feeling. And that is the basis of language. I would like to quickly recite a poem by William Merwin. He says, in a few lines, "Your absence has gone through me like a thread through a needle. Everything I do is stitched with your color." Do you feel anything when you hear those words, the gaps between the sentences? Do you feel his grief, his loss? Do you understand why he called this poem Separation? The power of words is enormous, both in its power to heal as well as its power to hurt. And in the next picture, you'll see an image, an MRI image of two different brains. We're going to focus on the areas where the circles are, and in the healthy brain, what you see is there are many parts of the brain which are lit up, and that's a normal brain. In a person who has undergone a lot of verbal and physical abuse, what you find is that many areas of the brain are actually reshaped. So the power of words on a developing brain are great enough to change it for a very, very, very long time. Silhouettes see both.
Now you've heard the power of language, the power of music, the power of arts when it comes to science. So you can see how the sciences and the humanities are two branches of the very same tree. We hope that when you can see the duality of these disciplines, we can start understanding the world around us and thinking critically about what we see, hear, and discover every single day.
What Rena and I were discussing at great length was what was the message which we would like to leave you with? What would be something that would enrich your lives as you go forward in your life? What we thought is that we would give you an insight into making this a practice in your life. When you see something, pause, look at it again, see if it changed, see if you changed.
Silhouettes see both. Thank you.
Thank you.